Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 1 of this Bible study series called The Story of Creation. I am your host, Carrie Ann Greenland, and with me, I have my husband, Carol Greenland. In this series, we will be dissecting the creation story as recorded in Genesis chapter 1. By doing this, we hope to show you that the story of creation is not just a record of the history of mankind's beginnings, but also a prophecy of what was to take place throughout the whole history of mankind. It is our intention to show that the objects mentioned in creation can be used to highlight the theme of the great controversy and symbolize different aspects of the battle between good and evil.
Keep your minds open as we attempt to show you a deeper dimension than what is often seen. Our focus for today will be Genesis 1 to 5. Let us begin. Read Genesis 1 to 2.
1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay, so I have a question. How does verse 1 start by telling us that God created the heaven and the earth, and then in verse 2, it tells us that the earth was without form? How did the earth not have a form after it was created?
Wow, these are loaded questions. How do I begin? Okay, here is the thing. Verse 1 of chapter 1 is simply a title for the chapter. In the time that the Bible was written, this was a common practice. Usually, an author would title his work before writing it. There are still remnants of this concept today. When we read newspaper or internet articles today, each article we see usually has a title. Consequently, Genesis 1:1 is telling us what is to be discussed in the rest of the chapter. However, this is not the only thing that the verse does. It also introduces the realm, where what is to be discussed in the rest of the book takes place. In addition to that, verse 1 identifies an important title of God, i.e., Creator, which is further developed in the rest of the chapter.
So then verse 1 tells us who did what, then the other verses tell us how and where it happened.
Exactly.
I understand that verse 1 is just the title for the chapter. But what did the scripture mean then, when it said that the earth was without form and void?
This is a very important question that you have asked. Please note that the Bible does not say that the earth had a bad form or bad shape. The scripture says it had no form. That is to say, it had no shape. Now, for something to have no form, it must not exist. Some will argue that the earth was only water then, but even water takes the shape of the container it is in. Make no mistake, water has a form. The fact that the scripture describes the earth as having no form is just making the point that the earth did not exist. So let me be clear about this. Up until this time, there was no form or shape to call the earth. As if that description was not enough, the scripture then goes on to use the word void, which means empty. This is just to stress the point about nothingness. The earth was shapeless and empty. I hope this is clear. Isn't it an amazing thought to know that God uses nothing to create something?
Yes, that is an amazing thought. So let me get this straight. There was nothing at all there. Nothing to refer to as the earth. When we read Genesis 1:2.
That is exactly right. To say that there was something to refer to as the earth before the first day of creation would be to give creation a period longer than 6 days. And that's not what we read in Exodus 20:11. This verse plainly tells us that God created everything that has to do with this earth within 6 days. Now that we have gotten that out of the way, I have a question for you.
What's that?
The scripture you just read, verse 2 to be exact, mentions two things that were not brought into existence during any part of the 7-day creation week. Can you tell me what these two things are?
Wait, am I to understand that there are things mentioned in verse 2 that existed prior to the first day of creation?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm telling you, and the earth is not one of them. Can you tell me what they are?
Let me go back to verse 2 and try to identify those things. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
Did you see them?
You said two things, but I see more than two things here. I see darkness, the face of the deep, the face of waters, and the Spirit of God.
Wow, you are extremely observant. Most people usually mention two things when I ask this question. Firstly, let me deal with the Spirit of God. God is the Creator, so He should not have even been mentioned. But you are right, He was not created. In actuality, He is the Creator. Before now, I have never heard anyone mention the deep, and consequently, I have never given it much thought before. Based on the Scripture alone, however, I can say that the deep is a geographical space. I will do some research and give you a more detailed answer later. But for now, I hope we can at least agree that the deep was a space. The other two things you mentioned, darkness and water, are the answers I typically get for my question. I don't think I have to define these, since these things are still present on the earth today. However, it is important to note that these things were not made during any part of the 7-day week cycle instituted at creation.
So, according to verse 2, the deep, water, and darkness are older than the earth.
That is correct. In succeeding videos, I will highlight what is the importance of acknowledging that these things, water, darkness, and the deep, predated the earth. For now, though, let's continue reading by reading verse 3 and 4.
Genesis 1, 3-4. 3. And God said, "Let there be light, and there was light." 4. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. 5. And God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Should I understand that the darkness was contained in the same place referred to as the deep, and God caused the light and the darkness to coexist in the same space?
This is another deep question. You are really asking some good questions. Yes, God made darkness and light to coexist in that same place, something that only God alone could do. It is interesting to note that the light did not totally dispel the darkness, but instead shared the space.
What? Usually, if I enter a dark room and turn on the light, the darkness disappears. How then am I to understand the concept of darkness and light sharing space?
The answer to your question is in verse 5.
5. And God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day.
God did not put away the darkness, but instead used it as part of the definition of a day. This should not be hard to understand, since we still have darkness, night, and light, day, presently sharing a specific time period.
All right, I have another question.
Let me hear it.
Verse 5 makes mention that the evening and the morning were the first day. Should I understand that there was no 24-hour period called a day prior to this?
Although the answer to your question should be pretty obvious, I'm here to tell you that some don't think it's that obvious. Before I can begin to answer this question, it is important to understand what time is. Time is simply a unit of measurement allotted to change. Understand that prior to this, change was never measured in any way, shape, or form like it is here on Earth. This was in part because the Earth did not yet exist. I like to describe this era or dispensation in heaven before the first day as timelessness, eternity, only because the concept that we know of time was not used. To say that there was timelessness in heaven is not to say there was no order or system in place to measure change. This is not what I am saying. All I'm saying is that our system of calculating time did not exist there. Understand that the first day did not exist until the first day was created on earth. Therefore, the passage of time before the creation of the first day could not be measured in days, weeks, months, or years, since the first day was not yet created. I hope this is clear. It seems fitting for me to declare that hereafter there will be endless time. Since God started days, this type of time measurement will never disappear. We are told in Isaiah 66:23 that hereafter our measurement of time will continue perpetually.
Wow, I never would have known that there was so much associated with the first couple of verses in Genesis.
Usually when a person is asked about day 1 of creation, they just skip over the first 2 verses and mention that God created light. However, as you have seen, there is more to the first couple of verses in the Bible than just God creating light. In the next video, we will go on to make inferences about the things that we have identified here.
Okay, we have come to the end of part 1 in the Creation Story series. We invite you to drop down your comments and questions below. If you like this video and would like to complete the series, please click on the link to be taken to part 2. You can also click on the blog link below if you would like to read through the entire series. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can be notified as soon as the other videos are posted.